What about the appearances? Well, here Bishop Spong asked, are they really physical? Isn't that a feature only of the later Gospels? Well, the case I presented doesn't depend on the nature of the appearances. It leaves it open whether they were visionary or physical. But let me say briefly why I do think they were physical. The claim that they only were physical in later Gospels assumes that these Gospels were written much later. But I think we have every reason to think that Acts was written prior to AD 62, and Luke's Gospel, therefore, sometime in the late AD 50s. That places it just as early as Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Secondly, there's no evidence whatsoever that physical appearances only came later. On the contrary, we have multiple independent attestation of physical appearances. Indeed, our sources are unanimous on this. Thirdly, if originally all the disciples saw were visions of Jesus, then it wouldn't have led to belief in his resurrection. At most, it would have led to belief in his exaltation to heaven, but not to his being raised from the dead. So I think we've got good grounds for affirming the appearances. Dr. Spong agrees with me that something big and powerful happened to bring about the origin of the disciples' belief. And he says we must affirm the reality of the resurrection, and we must affirm that it be available in every generation. But where my disagreement is, I think, is that Bishop Spong wants to retain the language of Christian theology while evacuating it of any literal significance. On Bishop Spong's view, Jesus wasn't literally raised from the dead. His corpse was thrown into a shallow dirt grave where it rotted away. Jesus is literally dead. So the words about Jesus being raised in the meaning of God and the resurrection being available to every generation really are in the end empty. It's just flowery phrases. It is the language of Christian theology, but without the literal content. And so my concern is that the power and life of the resurrection cannot be available to every generation unless this is a real event that actually happened rather than just mythology or a fairy tale. And therefore, I think it's critical that we affirm the historicity of the resurrection as a basis for our affirmation of its meaning.